Cold War with these notes. As we've left off in class, we just wrapped up World War II. And so the World War II is going to be a great segue into the Cold War. And because World War II plays a huge role in setting the stage for this Cold War. And I want you guys to know there's no battles in the Cold War. It's called a Cold War because nothing really ever takes place except for lots of tension and lots of verbal conflict between these powers. And just first of all, starting off, I just want you guys to know the United States and the Soviet Union after World War II are going to be left as the major world superpowers. The U.S. is going to have the atomic bomb that they used in Japan, so they know we have got access to that. The Soviets are going to have their very powerful Red Army, and so that's going to leave the U.S. and the Soviet Union as kind of the two major superpowers in the world, yet they have extremely different political ideologies. And so that's going to lead to a really interesting dynamic. So just kind of a review. In 1945, we talked about Russia, United States, Great Britain, Roosevelt, Stalin, Churchill. They meet at the Yalta Conference. And what this does is it basically splits Germany into four zones politically controlled by the Allies. You're going to have United States has a zone, Britain, France, and Russia all are going to have a zone of Germany to control. And Stalin is also going to pledge to allow free elections in Eastern Europe and in Poland. So he's going to pledge that he's going to allow these Eastern European nations to hold their own elections so that they can choose their own government. So that is what's going to come from the Yalta Conference in 1945. Just to give you guys a map, these are the zones that are the occupation zones of Germany after World War II. As you can see, Great Britain, France, United States, and USSR. Those are the occupation zones, and this is kind of going to spark some tensions going into the Cold War. Okay, so like I said, the United States and the Soviet Union are going to be left as the superpowers, and they're going to have two very different political ideologies. The United States has this Western democracy, free enterprise economy, where people have a say in their government. And the Soviet Union is going to have this command communism where the government controls every part of the economy and the government, especially under Stalin, who is engaging in his genocide with the Great Purge, killing people who don't agree with him and killing off groups of people that are not aligned with his political views. So you're going to have some really different dynamics here in these two superpowers. And that's going to create tension and problems during this time. You're also going to have new weapons. You're going to have the atomic bomb. You're going to have the emergence of nuclear weapons. You're going to have satellites and all of this new technology coming out of after World War II. And it's going to make warfare very dangerous and very scary. And so you're going to have people with access to these things, which is going to cause problems. And you're also going to have the United States rejection of this isolationism. Instead of just protecting themselves from communism, the United States is going to take a stand against communism. And they're going to practice this policy of containment, basically trying to contain communism at all costs and trying to stop the spread of communism. And so we're going to talk about that when we get into wars that kind of start because of this policy of containment. All right, so like I said, the United States and the Soviet Union are going to engage in some kind of competition. The United States and the Soviet Union are going to engage in this arms race. They're going to compete over who can develop nuclear weapons, who can develop satellites, biological warfare, all of these new kind of more scientific types of technologies are going to start to come out, and it's going to be a race to see who can develop the most and who can have the most technology, who can be the most dangerous. And falling in line with that is also going to be the space race. And the Soviet Union is actually going to launch a satellite, Sputnik, into outer space in 1957, and the Americans are going to quickly realize that they have got to start building a space program, and they've got to start building up more nuclear weapons and really trying to get this balance of terror. That's kind of what it becomes, is this balance of terror of who can have the most who can have the most weapons and who can make the most advances in space technology. And the United States and the Soviet Union are really just going to kind of use these nuclear weapons almost like a deterrent. Basically, if we have this nuclear weapon, then it's going to prevent other superpowers from attacking. So they really were using them as kind of almost like a safeguard against being attacked. So the space race and this arms race is really going to initiate during the Cold War. All right, so Stalin does not hold up on his plan to hold free elections in Eastern Europe. And he's just going to install communist governments in these little nations bordering Russia. In Eastern Germany that he gets to control, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and they're going to be known as satellite nations. They're going to be Soviet satellites, basically like little nations that are under the control of communist governments through Stalin. And so this is going to divide this Allied-controlled Germany into East and West. Communism in the East, democracy in the West, because the other allies, France, Great Britain, and the United States, are going to install democratic government. So you're going to definitely have what is known as the Iron Curtain, a definite divide between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And so it's going to be known as the Iron Curtain. And this Iron Curtain is referred to by Winston Churchill. He basically calls this split as the Iron Curtain, and it really does become very clear that communism and capitalism cannot exist in the same world, because the United States and other capitalist nations are trying to practice this policy of containment, trying to get other countries to not fall to communism. And so during this time, the United States is going to take a very firm stand against communism, and they're going to really push that policy of containment. And these are just a couple political cartoons that kind of depict how people viewed the Iron Curtain at this time, kind of as a wall being built up between the two regions of Eastern and Western Europe. All right, so the United States, instead of practicing their isolationism as they always did before, is definitely going to get involved. They're very fearful of Stalin. Like I said, he is very known for his genocide and his fierce unleash on his people. And so, like I said, the United States is going to adopt that policy of containment. They're going to try to stop the expansion of communism. And this is also going to be known as the Truman Doctrine, because President Truman is going to be the one who enacts this policy. And Truman is also going to carry out the Marshall Plan. And this Marshall Plan was a plan that was the hopes of it was to stop the spread of communism by giving financial assistance to any Western democratic nations to help rebuild after World War II. Because remember, we talked about in class, a lot of times countries fall to communism because they're having economic hardship. But Truman thought if we could give assistance to a lot of these nations, then they would not fall to communism. And the goal is basically to set up trading partners and help Europeans and help European nations resist that desire to fall to communism and kind of contain. All right, let's go back to Germany, talking about the zones, the 4 zones that were occupied by the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Well, you're going to start to see some tension growing there because of like I said, the different political ideologies. But one thing I want to point out that I didn't mention earlier was the city of Berlin was also split into 4 zones. You have US, France, Great Britain, and Soviet zones of Berlin. And the city itself was split because of its importance in Germany, being the capital of Germany. So at this time, the Western allies, so the democratic countries or allies, they begin to merge their zones of occupation to create one democratic state. Well, that's going to upset Stalin because he's going to rule his zone using communism. And so as these allies are merging, that's going to upset him. So he reacts by closing and cutting off all of the highways and railroad links to West Berlin from East Berlin. And this is going to really, hurt the West Berliners because now they are cut off. Their railroads and highways are now cut off. So they have no way of getting supply lines. And so the Western allies, the US, France, Great Britain, they are going to engage in the Berlin airlift, which they're going to airlift supplies and food and other things into the city of Berlin so that they cannot be cut off, that Stalin's plan cannot work. And so eventually Stalin is going to lift this blockade. But as a result, you're going to have two definite sides. You're going to have West Germany, which is going to be the Federal Republic of Germany. And then you're going to have East Germany, which is the German Democratic Republic. So you're going to have democracy in the West and you're going to have communism in the East. And so that's going to continue to cause problems as we move down. We're going to start to see major problems going up as this split in Germany happens. All right, in 1949, the United States, Canada, and other nations are going to come together to form NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And this is basically an organization designed to protect Western Europe from communism. And if they have to protect it using nuclear weapons, then they will. It's just carrying out that policy of containment to make sure that the other Western European nations do not continue to fall to communism. As a reaction to this, you're going to have Stalin in 1955 is going to come together with other Soviet leaders, and they are going to create the Warsaw Pact. And it's basically just the reaction to NATO of Eastern European countries coming together and forming an alliance. So it was pretty intense. So at this time, you are definitely going to have two different sides of this quote-unquote Cold War. You're going to have the Soviets in the East, and you're going to have the Western European people supporting the policy of containment in the West. And so this just kind of gives you an idea of the countries in blue were the ones involved in NATO. Nations in red are going to be part of the Warsaw Pact. So as you can see in the Cold War, while there was really no actual battle going on, no actual warfare just yet, it's just this rising of tensions and this rising of different ideologies kind of competing with each other, causing tension, leading to just different motivations for building up nuclear weapons in this arms race and space race. So it's really important that you understand the Cold War was never an actual war with battles. It was just more of this unspoken tension between the two superpowers, being the United States and the USSR, or Soviet Union. All of these wrap up questions here, guys. Make sure you do these at the end of your notes. How did the end of World War II lead to the start of Cold War tension? So how does some of the things that go on after World War II, how is that going to kind of spark this tension between the two superpowers? How does the policy of containment, or the Truman Doctrine, how is it going to increase those tensions? And what were some of the actions that are going to lead to more problems done by the United States and the Soviet Union? What are some of the actions that they take that lead to more problems and more tension during the Cold War? So after you do these questions, guys, think about those and bring them to class to discuss next time.